And there we are. Hare Krishna. Welcome to all our viewers, whatever time of the world you're there. Good morning, good evening, good night. Those who aren't joining live, yeah, please also comment on the threads. But if you are joining live, we'd love to hear you. This is a really big topic, and this will probably be one of many. We're joined by Abhideya, who I've recently got to meet and is quite an inspiring Vaishnavi. So a really good person to have as our first interviewee on this topic. But we suspect that others will contribute in due course. Maybe Janava Mata will join us if she can work out the technology. But Abhideya, please say a few words about yourself, what you do.
Hare Krishna, Damodar. Thanks so much for inviting me onto your podcast, and I hope that I can make a valuable contribution to this topic. So my name's Abhideya. I'm a disciple of Kadamba Kanana Swami. Very lucky that he picks me up from the Kali Yuga and tried to uplift me. I'm very, very grateful. And I run an initiative called Bhakti Kids Sangha. And I'll be honest, no one asked me to start that initiative. It was completely, an idea that was given to me by Krishna. And I have a big, big passion for the Grihastha ashram and for the care of Vaishnava families. So that's, the whole family unit, from the parents to the children, their physical health, their mental health, their spiritual health, everything. So part of that is running my own podcast that kind of addresses lots of issues to do with families and children. And I also make learning resources that are linked to Krishna for children, and, make little books and comics and songs. So everything's about kids and connecting kids to Krishna, actually. That's it in a nutshell. It's about connecting kids to Krishna and how families can help with that, because fundamentally that child's relationship with Krishna is their own, but we as parents can be stewards of that relationship. And so I try and, as much as I possibly can, kind of reach out to parents, give them the tools, advise them on what books are good, what resources are good, and just generally try to serve families as much as I possibly can, Damodar.
Oh, thank you. Look, it looks like Janava Mata is joining us.
Fantastic.
Oh, I can see her. There she is.
Yay,
can you hear us, Janava Mata? Can you hear us?
Yep, we're all good to go. Sorry,
no problem
showing me
at
that
all.
I'm not the controller.
Just see. So this would be a nice time for you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Me?
Yeah, of course. You're our honoured guest.
I don't even know why I'm here, but it's an honour to be part of this conversation. So thank you for inviting me. Who am I? That's a very good question. I think if we knew the answer to that question, then we wouldn't probably have to have this discussion.
Trust a devotee to have a completely philosophical answer to the question.
But actually, it's the truth. Like I've been thinking a lot about it, and really, if you dissect it and you boil it down, right, the whole reason that this conversation is needing to be had is because we're not really realizing who we are.
No, it's a very.
If we did, then we would all just be servant of the servant.
It's a very important point.
There would be no problem.
Very important point, and just from my limited knowledge, I'd say you joined ISKCON in the late 70s, early 80s, and for many years you've been running the ISKCON preaching in Dunedin in particular, running a kind of Bhakti Center type operation there. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, if you want to know a little bit of history, yes, I did, by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and the Vaishnavas, joined the movement in '79. In Auckland, and then we went down to Christchurch and started the Christchurch Yatra, and then I went to Sydney and I was there for a while on the women's Sankirtan team, and then to Melbourne for a couple of years, and then back to New Zealand, to Kasambara, Prabhu, spent 7 years collecting and establishing the New Varshan community there, and then we went to Berlin and established the temple there, and then to Christchurch and managed that one for 12 years. And then I came to Dunedin in 1997 to retire and started teaching vegetarian eating, and ended up feeding 300 students a day lunch for 25 years. And now we have a beautiful Bhakti Centre. And actually, the reason that I was a little bit on the hop was I've just come from a home program that we had at one of the devotees' houses, where there was probably 30 people there chanting the holy names and soaking up the mercy of Srila Prabhupada. So that brings you up to date. How's that?
Yeah, that's great. And thank you. And look, I was very excited to have you both join us, because you're doing, both of you, so much for the Krishna consciousness movement and engaging so many different souls, which is the real mission, introducing people to Krishna and helping cultivate tender faith into strong faith and so on. So I'll say a few words just to frame the issue here. Krishna consciousness, one of its central tenets is we're not these bodies, as you were hinting there, Janava. We're eternal spirit souls. And we're also taught that the practice of bhakti, savupadi vinirmuktam, we should be trying to get free from the upadis. You know, whether that's man, woman, or New Zealand English, or any of these kind of upadis, these temporary designations. And yet we find ourselves in this movement, which has a lot of cultural practices that potentially don't feel like, as a female practitioner, as a Vaishnavi, you're getting the same opportunities, or that your contributions are seen as valid, as worthwhile, and so on. I'd like to ask you about your coming to Krishna consciousness, because I think the messages around where do you fit in this movement, this must be an interesting thing for every woman who comes to the movement at some point, to either encounter some interesting statements that maybe Srila Prabhupada has made, or just some attitudes in general. You guys can stay at the back, or hey, how come the women aren't singing and giving class like the men, or whatever it may be. So I'd love to hear about how you came to Krishna consciousness and how you first made sense of those things and sort of negotiated them and still became committed and involved, because some people must bounce off when they encounter that. It's a hurdle they can't surmount. So maybe we'll go to Abhidaya first for that, and then we'll come to you, Janava.
Sure. So I'll start by just sharing how I came to Krishna consciousness, and then address the second part of your question. So I came to Krishna consciousness when, I was, I'd had a whole karmi life beforehand, right? And I'm going to be honest, I was pretty miserable in my job and in my life. I was a single parent. I was working in a job I really, really didn't like. I was having all these kind of, little nagging health concerns because I was so miserable. It was manifesting as disease, of course. And I started practicing Ashtanga yoga just as a means of preserving health, right? And as I was practicing and I was kind of digging deeper into it, I thought, there must be more to yoga than just what happens on a mat, or there must be something more to this. It's such an ancient practice. And so I started digging and digging, and then I found mantras and reciting mantras. And it was only when I started reciting mantras that I realized that there was like a toxic negative loop just running in my head, basically on repeat, that was quite focused on myself and making disparaging comments about myself. And I just began by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. That's the one that I gravitated towards too. So I started chanting Hare Krishna, and I ordered myself some beads online, and I started listening to Radhanath Swami's lectures and reading books. And this all took place before I actually went to a temple. So when I went to a temple, I was already giving up the things, that we're not supposed to do, moving towards the 4 regulative principles, chanting your beads every day, working on my own purification. And, I think sometimes it happens the other way around. We go to a temple, we meet devotees, and then we start introducing practices into our lives. But I was kind of starting to practice and get involved before I went to a temple. And then when I went to a temple for the first time, it was Diwali and Shri Prahlad was leading the kirtan. And the rest, as they say, is history. I was very, very lucky that the first time I went to the temple, Shri Prahlad was there leading the kirtan. There was a wonderful energy. And Prabhupada's philosophy just resonated with me so, so much. The chanting of the mantras just, I couldn't explain it or describe it at the time, but it was doing something for me that nothing else could. You know, antidepressants or this or poses or breath work, it just, nothing was doing for me what chanting the mantra. I know that's a very egocentric way of looking at it, but when you're a beginner, that's kind of how you are, you know, so you're looking at what can it do for me, whereas what can, rather than what I can do for it. So that's how it was in the beginning. And then, you know, I first came to the temple and then I start, you know, you come with this very idealistic view that you're going to go there, it's a spiritual community and everything's going to be perfect, or at least that's how I thought it was going to be. And then I realized that actually a lot of the issues that we face in the wider world, like women being subordinate or maybe getting lesser roles or any of those things, they still exist inside a spiritual community. They're not non-existent, they're still there, or at least that's been my experience. I don't want to, you know, that other people's experiences might have been different, but for me, I noticed that there was still bullying, still sexism, still racism, still domestic violence. All of these things that we see in the world around us, unfortunately, are present in ISKCON.
And that didn't put you off? That didn't deter you? You didn't go, hang on, is this how women are treated here? I'm not sure I can reconcile that with being, you know, a healthy spiritual organization?
I just thought it was maybe a high expectation from my end to expect this utopian place. But I also kind of want to be part of making it better, or hoping to redress the balance maybe. You know, I want to kind of put the question out there of what does a healthy society look like? A healthy society made up of just one group of people wouldn't be a functioning, sustained, self-sustaining society. You have to have the elderly and women and men and children and all of these groups together for a healthy society. And so a society that kind of elevates and upholds just one group of people or gives all the power to just one group of people is going to be a society, I believe, in my opinion, that will struggle. Because there has to be that representation for all, so that the rights and the safety and the protection of all, it filters down from the top.
Thank you. Let's get Janada's view as well. So we'd love to hear about how you came to Krishna consciousness and at what point you also had to navigate some of these either attitudes or statements that are out there. You've probably even seen a few different chapters of ISKCON's history, so you might have seen different settings. So I'd love to hear about all of that.
Yeah, it's been a pretty wild ride. But a good one, I have to say, a really, really good one. And that's why I'm still here. How I came to Krishna consciousness. Wow, that's a magical story. I won't tell the whole thing, but yeah, when I was there was no devotees where I lived for a start, but my brother brought me back a Bhagavad Gita from Australia that he got from devotees. And I fell in love with it. I couldn't really understand it, but I just knew it was special. And I used to carry it around everywhere with me. And as a kid, I used to pray to Jesus that he would show me what he wanted me to do with my life, because I really did feel that I was here for a reason. Like I felt that deeply in my soul, that there was more to life than just going to work and coming home and having dinner and watching telly, like our parents did. So, yeah, somehow or other by Krishna's merciful arrangement, I babysat for someone who became a devotee, and my friendship with her let me in the back door. And that was in the late 70s. So Prabhupada had just left the planet. So you can imagine the mood was pretty high. And, you know, we were pioneers. And for me, I didn't even notice like man, woman. It was like we were devotees, and our mission was to go and save the world and share Krishna consciousness with as many people as we could. And from my end, there really wasn't a distinction. I didn't even, like, I never thought about it. And what I say that is that it's just interesting. I've had my chart done just recently, and in there, by mudra, she does, you know, your past life thing. And in my past life, I was man, and I performed a lot of spiritual practice, and particularly worshipping the goddess. And she said that that's the reason that I've come in a woman's body in this lifetime, to explore that relationship with the feminine divine. So if you put all that together, you'll see that even before I met the devotees, I didn't really identify with man or woman. She said, you've got this universal kind of outlook. So I think I brought that to Krishna consciousness with me, and maybe I didn't notice the distinctions as much, but I certainly never felt that they inhibited me or held me back in any way. And because of the fact that my mum brought up children on her own, worked a full-time job and showed it, then I already had that attitude, right? So no one was going to stop me, not because I was a woman or not because I was anything. I was in for the mission, and as long as what I wanted to do lined up with what Prabhupada wanted, then nothing was going to stop me, and nothing ever has and nothing ever will, because, you know, that's what makes it work. Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how it works for me. Yeah. So it just never has been an issue. People have tried. People have tried to step in my way, but I just have to find a way around it. And I do.
And none of the statements potentially, you know, women less intelligent, or, you know, they should have more of a domestic kind of traditional role, none of those have been off-putting or discouraging of you?
No, not for me at all, because like I studied the whole, you know, I mean, obviously when I first read those things, I was like, oh yeah, but because I didn't kind of identify with that woman thing, you know, identity so much, so therefore it probably didn't touch me as deeply as some, although I definitely noticed it. But just studying Prabhupada's life and hearing all the pastimes with his different devotees, it became very obvious to me from the beginning that Prabhupada, you know, saw us as eternal servants of Krishna, and that the body that we had was the vehicle that we used to serve Krishna. So I never saw him behaving in that way. I never saw him treating the women any differently. Jamuna's, you know, Govindam prayers was playing in the temple every morning. All the Maharajis that were around, Bhattara, Gyanamurti, you know, Jayashri, Chincharupa, you know, they were all going for it. Nobody was stopping them. So it just didn't seem to me, I thought he was talking about a materialistic consciousness. That's what I thought, you know, when he was referring to those things, and, you know, women in material life. And it didn't really bother me, because, and then the other thing that I heard very early in the piece was that Prabhupada said that in Kali Yuga there's no difference between the men and the women. So it was like, if that applies to women, then it also applies to men. So, you know.
In introducing Krishna consciousness to newbies, is that something that you find difficult to navigate? It's a question to you both. I might go back to you first, Abhidaya. When you're, let's say, introducing someone who hasn't had prior exposure, and you can see them starting to discover the magic of Krishna consciousness, how do you navigate it when you get to those portions, particularly if it's, you know, an emancipated woman of the modern age? Is that difficult? Is it, you know, easy enough? What's your experience?
Well, Damodar, I wanted to just raise, there was one comment that Prabhupada had made that, you know, if you'd asked this to old me, I would have been like, oh my God, that's so shocking. And he made a comment about, you know, independent women aren't happy, or they're not happy. And I would have seen that in the past and thought, you know, how can someone say that? That's, you know, that's not right. But actually, when I'm really, really honest with myself, right? And I've been in this body for 36 years. I've been a hairdresser for a really long time. I've spent a lot of time with women doing their hair, and they tell me everything. That all of the women that basically didn't, sorry, I know this might hurt some people, but all of the women that didn't get married, that prioritized their careers, were extremely sad that they had done that. And they all vocalized that to me. Now, this is just the reality, right? So when we hear a statement like independent women aren't happy, we think, oh, well, that's not very good to say. Like, you know, a woman can be independent and be happy and have everything. And that's the idea that's rammed down our throat in this day and age. The women can have it all and be a perfect mother and have a perfect career and all these things. But I spent so much time with women who would literally cry to me that they had not invested early on in cultivating a family, and now the time is gone. Their fertility has run out, and now they have no hope of ever having a family. And it was heartbreaking, actually. Heartbreaking to see over and over and over again. And that's just a reality of like something that I've witnessed women go through, non-devotee women. And I used to do the hair of women that were, you know, very, you know, politicians or aides to politicians and had all these amazing careers. And they all said to me, I regret emphasizing my career above finding a partner, a husband, having some children. And now it's too late for me to even freeze my eggs or do some kind of intervention. So sometimes what reality says and what our ideals say can be two different things. You know, we hear women, oh, they're not happy when they're independent. And we think that sounds a bit abrasive because Prabhupada was so blunt. But actually, in truth, no one wants to be on their own. And most women are biologically hardwired to want families. Not all women, but most. And the women that miss out on that aren't happy. You know, I'm just going to be blunt. They're not happy. I've spent so much time with them and they're not. So when I'm preaching, I try to focus on all the positives. And I teach, you know, I've taught in yoga studios quite a bit, newcomers to Bhakti, people that are practicing physical yoga like I did, but moving into Bhakti. And I focus on the philosophy and I focus on Prabhupada's struggle that he went through in coming to the West and introducing all of these people to Krishna consciousness. And to be honest, I don't really go there with the statements. I don't even go there. I focus on the philosophy. I focus on the wonderful story of Prabhupada. You know, that Leela is so inspiring to anyone and everyone, even non-devotees like the Hare Krishna film, because Prabhupada's story is so inspiring, you know. So I try and focus on those things and I try not to go there. And I've had students come to me and ask me, and I just say, you know, there's lots of different explanations, like women are less intelligent. I've heard so many different explanations of that. You have to come up with your own, how you feel about that. But ultimately, what are we going to focus on here? Are we going to focus on a statement that can be kind of taken out and used any which way, or are we going to look at the philosophy as a whole and Prabhupada's example? And also, like Janava Mata pointed out, the way Prabhupada personally dealt with women, to me, speaks much more than than like a statement that can be used out of context.
Yeah, thank you. And Jennifer, I know you introduce heaps of people on a regular basis. That's essentially what you're doing. Does this ever come up? And if so, is it hard to navigate, or are there ways of explaining it like Abhidaya has just shared? How do you reconcile it all for people?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely comes up, that's for sure. But I think the very fact that you're doing it, you know what I mean? Like that you're taking, like somehow or other Krishna's put me here in the role of some type of leader and you know, in a woman's body who's just embracing Krishna consciousness to the fullest. And so that's the example that they've got to follow. That speaks louder than anything that they'll read. But if it does come up, and it does come up, I just say, you know, some of these statements are cultural. You know, they're cultural statements, so you can see them in a cultural way. And this is Kali Yuga after all. Like, you know, most of the pastimes of the Bhagavatam are from thousands of years ago, and those cultural things applied then, but it's different in the age of Kali, you know. And then I just quote some positive things that Prabhupada said, and it kind of evens it up, and hopefully we skirt around it and get on with the real business. But if someone gets stuck on it, then I'm more than prepared to sit with them for as long as it takes and work my way through it with them and answer their questions and share with them what my realizations are on the topic. And that's the best that you can do. I mean, it's definitely something that needs to be addressed. Jayashree and I have just spent a few days together, and Raja Kumari, and it's something they're deeply concerned about at the moment. It's something that we're on trying to you know, clear up and what's the word, to just take a good look at it and learn how we can understand it and present it to the general public. Because I don't know if you know this, but in the Maharaj and the ISKCON communications team, they had a survey done by a, you know, Standard & Poor's or someone like some type of you know, advertising company that did those things. And the results that they got back were that 85% of the women that filled in the survey were concerned about the woman's role in Krishna consciousness. So, you know, it was a problem back then. It's definitely a problem now, and it's definitely something that we need to work on and unpack it so that we can present it in a way going to inflame like attention. So I'm glad we've got the conversation started. I think we could go on for a very long time about what to do about it. But one thing I just want to say now is, before, you know, while I was contemplating what I was going to say and, you know, talking to people, devotees about it, Jai Shri and others, I was all fired up and rearing to go, because for me, it's not a problem, right? And it never has been, but I know that it is. So it was like, well, I've got my way of dealing with it. But then I started to doubt myself and go, maybe I'm just a total rebel and a renegade, and maybe I'm not actually hearing what Prabhupada is trying to say. So I freaked out a bit. And so I thought, what can I do to make sure that I'm bona fide? And so I wrote to Vishaka, you know, because I thought I spent a week with her a couple of years ago, and for me, that was being with Prabhupada. Like, I actually felt like I'd spent a week with Srila Prabhupada. That's how pure and potent she is, and spot on. So I thought, if I ask her, then she, you know. And so I did, and she sent me What's a Woman to Do. I don't know. I've put it up on my Facebook page, and I'd love to include it here, because I sat down and I listened to all 4 of them, and I just bawled my eyes out, because actually everything that had been my experience and my realization was totally in line with what she's telling us was Prabhupada's mood, that it's a personal thing, that it's according to time, place and circumstance, that you're dealing with individuals, right? She mentions in there how Prabhupada told Nandarani, or told the devotees that were in the room, Nandarani is more intelligent than her husband. And they're like, but he's so intelligent. Prabhupada said, yes, but she is more intelligent, right? So that's her saying it straight up, and he said it twice. And she gives so many other examples, which, you know, I won't go into now, but the whole thing just blew me away. She's taken a look at it. She's unpacked it. She's gone into all the hard questions and all the hard comments, and she's presented them in just such a fantastic way, without diminishing or discrediting what Prabhupada's saying, but showing it in a new light. And I really think that every woman devotee in the Krishna consciousness movement should sit down and take an afternoon and watch it, listen to it, not just once, but many times, because every time I listen, I'm hearing something more. And what solace and kind of clarity and just a feeling of empowerment and shelter I found from listening to that. It was like it was coming from Prabhupada's mouth. And I tell you, it's powerful. So that's my go-to shastra for a woman's role in Krishna consciousness. And, you know, yeah.
Thank you. And Vishaka, as people may know or may not know, is the temple president of Bhaktivedanta Mana, and so taking on massive responsibilities. And perhaps Vaishnavis doing temple presidents roles is still relatively rare, but it's certainly on the increase. I'd like to pick up your point about culture, because there does appear to be a sort of culture war in the host society, as well as in our own movement. We have some people who are super traditionalists. And you've described different ages of the movement, Janova, where in the early 60s, as in the mid to late 60s, the early days of the movement, you know, that sense of designations was also almost minimal. Almost every temple was started by a husband and wife couple. Everybody would take turns leading kirtan and giving class and so on. maybe somewhere around the early 70s to mid 70s, it became a little bit more male dominated. And even there's these horrible urban legends where certain swamis were of the view, we should send all the women to Australia, all the women and children, just leave the brahmacharis alone. And this idea that the brahmachari was the prized joiner, and you know, the women were just an allurement or something that had been reduced in those ways. Prabhupada was, as we say, quite an innovator. And so things like giving second initiation, actually, I believe Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur also did that. But this was a breakthrough, and there was quite a bit of criticism that, you know, Vaishnavis were getting Gayatri and those kind of things. So we'll certainly look at some quotes. I'd love to hear your thoughts, because obviously in the greater world, in the outside world, the host society, there's been a real revolution around men and women's roles, and they're still somewhat debated. And arguably, although there's more of a balance, there's still a lot of catching up to do. And maybe ISKCON is catching up, maybe it's not. I'd love to hear your views. How far along the maturing are we? And what is still yet to go? And I'll put that one to Abhidaya first. So balancing sort of the old traditional ideas with the new ideas of becoming more inclusive. How far along are we? How far have we got to go?
So I feel like with regards to the traditional ideas, one thing I really appreciate about ISKCON was it kind of values mothers. Or at least I feel like there's a message about valuing mothers in our sastra from Prabhupada, you know, to Chaitanya and his mother. Like and in the modern society, we have completely lost that. There is, you're almost looked down on as being a mother, and heaven forbid you should choose to stay at home if that's your choice to do, and that's what works for your family. You're kind of almost looked down upon, like, don't you want a career? Don't you want your own money? Don't you, you know? And I feel like that's kind of sad that we've lost that in the outside world. You know, a neighbor just the other day was sharing with me that she never takes maternity leave. She goes back to work after like 4 weeks of having the baby and gets an au pair. And I always talk on Bhakti Kids Sangha about how formative the first 5 and 6 years of a child's life is. And if we can even just get any amount of time for connection with that child, so important. And, you know, there's some sacrifice that has to come from the parents for that, especially in those early years. And it does tend to come from the mother, because we're the ones that breastfeed. We're the ones that do all those things that people in male bodies can't do. So I feel like there's some really wonderful, what some would regard as old-fashioned ideas about motherhood and where a woman's place is, and giving women that choice to want to be a mother again and actually raise their children and not just hand them over to a childcare. I feel like there's that empowerment there in Krishna consciousness. What I worry about is that there is, you know, Bhaktivedanta Manor is a great example. We've got Vishaka Devidasi as the temple president. It wasn't that long ago that a woman wasn't allowed to give class there. Isn't that funny? Like, has changed. Like, a woman wasn't allowed to give a class, and now we have a female temple president. And there's the, you know, I've heard some pervading attitudes about, well, women shouldn't be in leadership. Women shouldn't, you know, we should, you know, the ladies' kirtan night disappeared at our local temple. Mysteriously in the night, just disappeared. And sometimes it feels like there's an erosion of, you know, even just the poster of the Vaishnavi representatives disappeared off the notice board. And in areas of things like regarding domestic violence and things like that, you know, we were kind of almost like we want to bury our heads in the sand and think, well, we're a spiritual community, that stuff doesn't happen here. Whereas actually, no, we're a group of people that have come. A lot of us aren't second generation devotees, and we've come with all this baggage from elsewhere and brought it into ISKCON with us. So those kind of issues that affect the rest of the world are present in ISKCON. And I worry that there's not any recognition or provision for those. You know, I'd love to see a situation where we had some provision for women leaving domestic violence situations. Instead, we ostracize those women. Instead, they're kind of almost looked down upon as the cause of their situation. I say that from personal experience. That's not speculation. You know, being a divorced woman, you're looked down upon, and you're also seen as being, you know, not worthy of having another relationship after that as well. You know, I felt like it was always seen as controversial that after I got divorced, I married someone else and and continued my family. So there's definitely some attitudes there, which I think, and I say this coming from an Indian body, I have an Indian parent, that there are some traditional Indian values that kind of get brought over about, stay in that marriage at all costs, even in the face of domestic violence, even when the children are being harmed. I don't think that it's healthy for us for a healthy society to propound those ideals, because then cycles of trauma are generated that go on through families, sometimes for generations. Like those attitudes, I feel like could go a long way in shifting.
Yeah, thank you. Let me give you a scale. Imagine there was a -10 through 10 scale. At -10, oops, I'm trying to make sure my hands are the right way around for you to see them. At -10, we have, this is so oppressive and so fundamentally restrictive of women, it absolutely puts people off. And no sane woman would join this movement. That would be a -10. And a +10 is we've got the settings perfect. We've absolutely created conditions where, as you described earlier on, a house in which the whole world can live. That the modern day woman can say, I can see myself belonging in this society and have every opportunity my talent and inclinations would afford me. What's the number, you reckon? Or it could be a range, so it might be different in different places. And what would get it to that magical, fully attractive, fully inclusive, and so on? So that's still to you, Abhidaya, and I'm going to ask the same question of Janava in a second.
Well, I think we have a very long way to go. I wouldn't say it's at the really bad end of the scale, but I think we're definitely erring towards that, because I do speak to women who are put off by the movement because they have heard stories about women having to eat downstairs or separately, and all of these kind of horror stories, and they're concerned, naturally concerned. And there are barriers if you're in a woman's body. There definitely are. But there's also barriers if you're in a woman's body outside of ISKCON. The way that you're perceived, the way that you're literally interrupted in meetings if you're in a woman's body, or you're paid less for doing the same work. So I'm not saying it's right, and I'm not saying we should support it, but definitely outside of ISKCON, we see all those things there. And I seem to hear from a lot of people like Janava Mata, from Mataji, like Jayashree Mataji, that when Prabhupada was in his body and here in ISKCON, it wasn't like that, and that these changes seem to kind of come after this idea that women can't give classes or can't, lead kirtans and things like that. So I wonder where those things came from. And yes, if I'm being honest, I think they do put women off. They do. And if I'm perfectly honest with you, Damodar, there have been some moments where I've even considered leaving myself, and that is just because I have felt like they're never going to fully accept me, or I'm never going to be, or I'm never going to be allowed to do that service, or I'm always going to be squeezed out. But also I would like to add that sometimes the other women are also doing it to the women too. So there's a paradox. Sometimes the stuff that goes on in the temple and the women that get kind of discriminated against, it's sometimes from the other women as well. So we also have to learn to support each other and work together and uplift each other if we want to be respected and recognized for our services and included more and all of those things. I would highly recommend working together, putting together cultural things aside of Indian or Western, or do you go to Govinda's, do you go to HKCC, do you go to ISKCON Sydney? All those things need to be put aside, and we need to come together, the Matajis.
So what kind of number? Give us a number on the scale.
I'm thinking, 10 was the worst, wasn't it? So I'm thinking...
No, 10 is absolutely perfect settings. Minus
10's perfect.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, you're asking someone who's terrible with numbers. I'm erring towards at the worst end. It's not in the middle. It's erring towards the worst, and it varies from yatra to yatra. If you look at ISKCON Phoenix, they have a female temple president. They have lots of women's programs and child protection programs and kids programs. So some centers are different as well.
So let's get Janova's view, but I might come back to you and ask what would be some incremental improvements that you think could be easily done. But Janova, same question to you. On that scale, what would you say the setting is? Are you there, Janova?
I think I could only speak from my... Yeah, I think I could only speak from my experience in Australasia, to be honest, because otherwise it would just be a speculation. And I think it would be worse in other places than what it is in Australasia, because I think we're pretty progressive here, to be honest. And so, yeah, if you ask me about Australasia, I would say a 7.
Okay,
but
so pretty positive.
I'm definitely I'm an optimist, and you know, my experience is definitely probably colouring that as well. But yeah, 7. You know, 7. I would say. If you ask me about Dunedin, I would say, you know, because that's the environment that I'm creating. Because you know,
we missed that number. Then somehow you just glitched. What was the number for Dunedin?
Oh, okay. Krishna stole it from me. I said, did you get the 7 for Australasia?
Yeah, we got the 7 for Australasia.
Okay, so if you were asking me about Dunedin, which is here, I would say a 9 to a 9.5 out of 10, because that's the environment that I want to create. Because, you know, that was Prabhupada's environment. Like, you know, Vishaka dealt with all these issues. She dealt with them asking Prabhupada about women gurus, asking Prabhupada about women temple residents, asking Prabhupada about, you know, can women do anything? And Prabhupada is for sure. You know, impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary. That's what we were brought up on. And that's how we live our lives, right? It had nothing to do with a woman or a man. To Krishna, end of story. You've got your body, you use it in the best way for serving Krishna, but it's not a problem. So that's the way we do it here. And I think Australasia, to be honest, healthy. One thing I want to say, which I did think about while I was contemplating the subject, and that is we need to realize that we're not limited by the institution in any way. Like, no devotee in a woman's body should think that their devotional service is dependent on the institution, because it's absolutely not. Like, I think Prabhupada built a house in which the whole world can live. You imagine it with unlimited rooms, right? And if you don't get on with the people in one room and they're making it hard for you, just go into another room and start a party, right? Just go and start a party with people that you resonate with and inspire you, and people that you inspire, and see what happens. That's how Krishna consciousness is the world. If we sit around and wait for, you know, the boys club to change everything, we'll be dead before anything happens, pretty much. That's how I feel. So go and do it. Be the change that you want to see. Nobody can stop you. You know, I came down here, I was by myself. There was nobody here. I came with a friend who was going to teachers college. She's like, can you come with me? I don't know anybody. I'm like, sure, because we just put a new temple president in Christchurch, and the first thing he did was take my car off me. And I'd paid for all the cars in the car park with my collection, but he decided he wanted my car. So I was like, I don't think this is going to work. I'm out of here. So I came down here, you know, thought I was going to retire. And after 2 weeks, I'm like, no, I'm bored now. So what can I do? And look what happened. You know, 500,000 plates of prasadam. We've made heaps of devotees. We own freehold temple. You know, we've saved enough money to buy a eco village. You know, there's people coming.
Aye.
You know, like from somebody who decided that you weren't going to, you know, be pushed around by a misogynist. And that was what was going on. So it was like, no one can stop you. And the women in this movement need to know that. Nothing can stop somebody who wants to serve the lotus feet of Guru and Gauranga. Nothing, right? And Prabhupada made that very clear. It's not that you're breaking away. I mean, he broke away from the Gaudiya Math because he could see what a mess it was, right? He didn't go in and try to necessarily clean it up. He's like, I'm just going to do it over here. So I'm not saying leave ISKCON. What is ISKCON? That's what we have to answer that question also. You know, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, it's a house in which the whole world can live. That means there's room for everybody, right? and the opportunities are unlimited. And somebody might be sitting in the lounge room like, but sorry, mate, you know, you don't, because this is Prabhupada's house and he's made room for everybody. So go for it, you know, go for it. Don't let these things get in the way. If you can do something to make it better, then do something to make it better. But if you're banging your head against a brick wall, just go to another room. Go to another room. There's so many people waiting for us.
You are one of those rare gems that's quite entrepreneurial and have a huge sense of agency. No, and I imagine because you are the leader down there in Dunedin, the experience of anyone who encounters Krishna consciousness in such a setting with a role model like you will have a totally different impression than someone in a very traditional
hopefully
setting.
I mean, it might put some people off, you know, it might put some of the men off, but hey, what can I do, you know?
I have to admit, I'm a little sorry,
and credit goes to my mum, because she, sorry, I think I've frozen.
No, it's okay. I think there's
stop talking.
No, you're good. I think there's a little bit of a delay occasionally. Yeah.
Anyway, that's enough said. I'm outing myself now, the renegade that I truly am. But it's okay, because, you know, Prabhupada's giving me full permission, I feel.
I hope I get to meet you one day. I think you're showing how important leadership is, and how that, like I was saying before, filters down to the community, because your experience is like completely different to mine, because you've built somewhere where people aren't discriminated against, and where people are welcomed, and they are, you know, given service according to their nature. And it's your leadership has created that little miniature society, and I think that's awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Yeah, but also, you know, like Jayashree and, you know, Pratapna, look at them. Like, you know, look what they've done. You know, she's not holding back. She's all guns blazing, right? She's an incredible devotee. A Chincharupa, as, you know, this, you know, working alongside Aniruddha. Look what they're doing. I mean, you can take so many women in our movement that are actually doing what I'm doing and more, but you don't hear about them because they always hold the husband up as the, you know, as the prize, right? You know, I was married for 17 years. Carlos and I managed Christchurch Temple, Wellington Temple, and the same mood was there, because he has that mood as well. You know, his mood was, we're all serving Krishna together. So, you know, it really depends on who's running the show when it happens in a temple, you know what I mean? But, you know, progressive Vaishnavas, you know, devotees that see it as it is and were brought up in that time when, you know, in Prabhupada's time, basically, where everyone was one big family and they were just going for it together. That's the mood that they'll continue with, you know. And those that have got another agenda and another mood, they'll do it the way they think, you know, it's meant to be done. But that's their interpretation. You've got to go back to what Prabhupada, how Prabhupada did it. And, you know, you've all alluded to that, and it's a fact. The history is there. You talk to the Madhajis, who are Prabhupada's disciples, they saw it all change. It was never like that when Prabhupada was here. The women and the men stood side by side. You know, nobody was held back. The men tried to make it like that, and Prabhupada shut them down. Like they said to him, you know, the sannyasis said, oh, you know, Palika, right? Palika was cooking for Prabhupada. They're like, oh, we can't be around a woman. Prabhupada said, then you go. You go, right? And then he, you know, they didn't want to play the Jamuna prayers. Prabhupada said, what is wrong with you? You know, I listen to it every day, right? If you don't like, you know, having the women around, then go to the forest. That was his mood. So how does it, you know, why have we allowed this other stuff to creep in? You know, it's our Vaishnav. That's what I think. It's really bodily concept of life. Sure, there's a way of doing things that works, right? But that's based on respect and love. That's not based on what type of body you have. It's based on love and respect. And a truly sensitive Vaishnava will know exactly how to behave in whatever situation they're in. Nobody has to tell them, you're a woman, behave like that. know, because if the heart's clean, then you can sense what needs to be done and what doesn't need to be done, and what to say. Krishna will guide you from within. Are we not capable of hearing his voice? You know, so
just on that subject, just on that subject of being a Vaishnav, there is a famous verse from Padma Purana that I often cite when I hear people, because there is a group of devotees, and I want to talk about this, who see this progressive mood as feminism and some kind of contaminated influence of the modern world and anti the old traditional ways. So we'll talk about that backlash. But here's a verse from Padma Purana. I don't know the meter of it. Ache Vishnu Shiladhir Guru Shuna Maratir Vaishnave Jati Buddhir. So that's the first line. If you see the deity as stone, if you see the guru as an ordinary person, if you discriminate against any Vaishnava based on their jati or the family that they've taken birth in, but arguably it's the same comment about an upadi. Don't think here is a Sudra devotee, or don't think here is an Indian devotee, here's an American devotee. And I can't see why you would not say that's to do with male, female as well. And the last line, quite famously, Savai Naraki Sa. Prabhupada used to quote this a lot. Someone who thinks like that the guru is, you know, an ordinary person, that the Vaishnava belongs to a particular class, and that the deity is stone, is of a hellish mentality. In other words, it's actually hellish to consider Vaishnavas due to their designation and due to their body. And you can certainly tell that there are some, I typically call them the Taliban, the Vedic Taliban, who they can't even utter the word Vaishnavi. They'll only ever talk about women, and with that sort of contemptuous or disdainful kind of tone. What do you make of this reaction? You know, is there an element of time, place, and circumstances where we're saying, yes, even though the old Vedic traditions were a particular way, we now live in the 21st century, and we do have to make some non-threatening, non-critical, non-core adjustments to just be a little friendlier place and to deal with the expectations that people have. They will expect to see a woman give class as well. They'll expect to see a woman lead kirtan as well. That question to you first, Abhidaya.
Wow, that's such a big question, isn't it? Are you asking me how I feel about that? The kind of conservative, as you call them, the Vedic Taliban. I really like that. The morality police.
Just this reaction. This reaction that says all of this is an accommodation with modern liberalism. It's actually not Vedic. You should just be in the kitchen. You should just be folding your husband's clothes, giving him babies, raising the kids. You shouldn't aspire to do something beyond that. Anything beyond that is unchaste. And there are people who argue.
We recently had a Vaishnavi speaker come through Sydney who was propounding these kind of messages about women, and we should only have 2 saris. We should just be, in the home. And look, I don't want to sound hypocritical because I've chosen to stay at home and look after my children. But that's not to say that that's always what I'm going to do, or that I'm never going to go and study, or I'm never going to have a job or anything like that. It's never going to change. And also that was, my choice. That wasn't forced upon me. I do find it confronting when I hear those, when I am confronted with those attitudes. There was even, there's almost like this obsession with wanting to be Vedic, isn't there, from certain people like this. I want to be Vedic. I want to be, and it's almost like, do we even really know what Vedic is? I know we've got the sastras and stuff, but in reality, we don't really know fully what it was like to live in Vedic times. And we're not in Vedic times. Now, I'm not saying that we should, start doing deity worship in swimwear or something like that, or in jeans, or, I know, there's people in Krishna West that do deity worship in jeans. And I'm always kind of like, maybe we should still keep the devotional clothes and the suchi and everything. And it's like, where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line of keeping our traditions and not watering things down. I just worry that the whole, I mean, and I hear the feminism thing, I think it's a little bit of fear mongering from, sorry to say, a group of people that want to hold on to power and control. And so what they do is they, you know, and we see this happen with, you know, in the world with different races and stuff, is they'll kind of, you know, oh, but if we have female dikshagus, there's going to be women running around in mayapur and bikinis. It's like, that's just fear mongering. It's very, come on, it's very unlikely to happen. Women are not going to just revolt, you know, but a healthy society has to have representatives of that society in power, or not in power, but making decisions and in leadership and teaching the classes to be reflexive of that community. You know, if we're honest, this community now in the present day is made up of grihastas. You know, it's not the sea of saffron that it used to be. And yet all the management are, like most of the management are renounced people. So of course they're going to be thinking about, well, they're not going to be thinking about women and children, are they? Realistically, if they're a sannyasi. So that's why we need someone representing children, the elderly, women in the decision making to make it fair for everyone.
Yeah, thank you for that. Same question to you, Jennifer. When these protests come from the ultra-Orthodox traditionalists, you know, this is just feminism. We're moving away from the old ways. Prabhupada wanted the old ways. What's your thoughts about that?
Well, it's the same answer. I think, like, Prabhupada showed us what his vision and what his mood was, right? And he saw everyone as an eternal servant of Krishna. And he encouraged them to engage in devotional service according to their propensities and according to their nature and according to the gifts that Krishna had given them. So it doesn't even stand. Like, and it doesn't stand with our philosophy either, because, you know, Lord Chaitanya rejected Varnashram even. You know, he's, you know, when he was talking to Ramananda Roy, right? And he's saying, what's the perfection? So the perfection is to understand that I'm the servant of the servant of the servant. And Prabhupada's mood was that if you're qualified and you have what it takes, then do it. He got in India, right? Like when they were traveling around, we have Saturday nights as Prabhupada night, and we read the Prabhupada Lilamrita and also, you know, the Bond of Love. So we get a nice balance of Prabhupada's, you know, relationships with the devotees. And he got the Maharajis to lead kirtan and give class in India when they were traveling around doing the programs. I mean, God, if it's good enough for there, then surely he envisaged that they'd be doing the same thing in the West. I mean, it's written again and again and again by Srila Prabhupada himself that, you know, a Vaishnavi is their equal. It's written in Chaitanya Charitamrita. He says, you know, a woman that's serving the Lord as a preacher of Krishna consciousness, you know, as a devotee of Krishna consciousness, there's no difference. Like, I don't understand where they get this from. It's not Prabhupada's mood. Not Prabhupada's mood at all. So
I have a sense I have a sense a lot of people read their own motives into Prabhupada and then they co-opt the quotes that seem to support their own pre-existing attitudes, because Prabhupada was certainly a great innovator. I'd like to pick up on the point that you just made, Abhideya, about women's representation in leadership. I mean, it's always struck me as kind of odd that you would discount 50% of the talent pool. What to speak of, as you say, that people from a different vantage point will actually have different considerations. Generally, in the secular world, it's recognized that the more diverse a leadership team is, the better innovation is, the better collaboration is, and so on. And we'd certainly, we'd certainly be looking at the track history, let's say, of an all-male leadership in the society and going, oh, it's not the best of report cards. Like, I'm not sure what it is that we think terrible is going to happen.
Yeah.
The big one. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I agree, Damodar. I think that, you know, when we hear that, you know, the feminism thing, it's just it's a bit of fear mongering, because what is going to happen if some women come into management? You know, well, we might get a baby change table put in the temple and somewhere for women to breastfeed and all those kind of things, like things that are considerations for us. Like, they're not going to come in and you know, try and upend everything just because we've let some women into management. I think there's fear with the people who have the power, sorry to use that word, but they have the power and they want to hold on to it. And there seems to be an unwillingness to let anyone else in. And I agree. If we want to utilize the talent that we have in ISKCON, why not have some women in there? We have, as Janova Matters pointed out, so many qualified, talented women who could do that very, very well. And we're not utilizing that because the power structure is for renounced males. And then we won, like I took someone to the temple for the first time a couple of weeks ago for a children's festival, and she took her 2 kids and she was like, oh, there's nowhere to change a nappy. There's nowhere for me to breastfeed. And I was like, look, we just don't have, those things just aren't even considered here. You know, you even go to a shopping mall here in Australia and there's a parents' room. You know, it's seen as standard in the modern world to have these provisions. And I worry that if we don't move with that a little bit and have those provisions, that people will see us as unapproachable.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost surprising, isn't it, in this day and age, that those considerations wouldn't be there, and that, you know, we look anachronistic, out of date, out of touch, and
basically.
so on. Let's have we've got a question here from Neela Hargreaves, and I might put it to you, Janova, first, and then get you, Abhidaya, to comment as well. In the history of feminism in the West, we've seen the rhetoric of equal opportunity turn into a situation where women are pushed and obliged and sometimes forced into working careers, etc., which ultimately exploits them further. How do we guard against women having equal opportunity in ISKCON not turning into women being pushed, obliged, coerced into leadership? Yeah, so that we're trying to do it for quotas and we're going against maybe people's natures just to, yeah, be progressive and be with it. Janova, what are your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I put that on the top of my list up there with what's a woman to do. It's all about personalism. You know, Krishna consciousness is all about personalism, right? So if we had this ideal society, you know, the way it was run when Prabhupada was here, it was like a family. And, you know, he knew everyone and he knew their natures and he engaged them accordingly. So that's why it's so important, I feel, to have women in the management, because just like you have a mother and a father and a family, right? And they play different roles and they understand their children in different ways and they lead them in different directions according to their natures and their personalities. So, you know, good leadership and good management, you know your people, you know them inside out. They're like your children, actually. You know, like that's how it feels for me with the devotees that have joined here and the people that come on the weekends and the people that participate. I make time. I go and visit them in their homes. You know, we have a kids' room with colouring in pictures and toys for the kids to play with, because we want people to know that we actually care about them. You know, that they're part of the family. And so if ISKCON was run like a family, you know, instead of a corporation, then all these things would be possible, and they wouldn't see it as a threat that women were in positions of leadership and management. They would actually see it for what it is, and that is a great necessity, because that's the only way that you're going to make that house a loving home, is by having loving mothers to look after the people that come. And then you engage them according to their propensities. You find out what their talents and their skills, out what's going on in their heart and their mind and their life. And then you just gently take them by the hand and walk them in whatever direction they feel comfortable to go. Then you have the most dynamic, most balanced, most healthy, you know, society you can imagine. And that's, you know, in many ways why Prabhupada, you know, had such an impact, because that was his heart. You know, he cared so much about every single devotee, every single person. He loved them. And they said that, Prabhupada, how come everyone loves you? And he said, well, that's because I love everyone. Right? So that's the mood of management. I don't know if it answers the question. The answer to the question is personalism. It's the answer to every question, really, because that's what people want, to love and to be loved. But to love someone, you have to know them. You can't just rubber stamp them or push them into something that's not right for them. Otherwise, they don't last. You know, they're not happy. So to answer Neela's question, you know, we have to learn how to love one another and get to know one another and help one another, you know, find the service that's suited to their particular nature and their particular, you know, level of Krishna consciousness. That's what I would say.
Thank you. Avidaya?
I just loved your answer, Janavamata. I just thought it was so perfect. And I think Neelam Bari's concern about, you know, women being mothers and being forced into the workplace, like I hear that, like I get that. I know, you know, not all women want to be mothers. Some women want to be brahmacharinis and don't want to have children, and there's a place, should be a place for them as well. You know, it shouldn't be a situation of force. I don't think a problem of having too many women in leadership is going to be a problem we're going to have anytime soon in ISKCON. That's not a concern that I have. I think there are natural, as Janavamata said, according to their nature, there will be natural leaders that will show themselves. Like we see Vishaka Devdasi, you know, a wonderful leader at Bhaktivedanta Manor. You know, the way you're leading your centre, Janavamata, the fact that you've said that there's a room with toys and things for children, I find so, that just makes me so happy. Because that says to the children and the women that come, you're welcome here. You're part of this community. You're not excluded, you know, and this is kind of what I've been trying to do with Bhakti Kids Sangha, like getting high chairs and change tables and things as amenities for parents in ISKCON spaces, so that it's clear to people that actually you are part of this community. If you're in a family, if you're a wife, if you have a child, if you're an unmarried woman, you can still be part of this community. So I think you made really some wonderful points there, Janavamata.
Actually, it's funny because tonight at the program there was kids, you know, and I mean there's always kids, and I try to engage them. Like I want them to feel like they're an important part. You know, teach them how to play the kartals, let them lead kirtans. You know, I tell them you better listen because you're going to be giving class one day, and it empowers them. They feel like they're an important part of the community. And so we were talking about that tonight, and I was telling, you know, some of the parents that were there that Prabhupada said the children are our future hope, you know, and that's a profound statement. You know, he's showing us, you know, look how precious these children are. They're Vaikuntha children. They're the future of our movement in so many ways. So we need to know how to care for them and love them and look after them and honor them, you know, so that they feel that they are, you know, an important part of the family. It's so important. So it's the same thing again. It's personalism.
There was a quote. Sorry, go ahead, Abiday.
I was just going to say, more often than not, we tend to pour all our attention into doing outreach programs and things like that, which are wonderful and valuable. But we actually sometimes forget the children that we have already in our movement and then cultivating their bhakti. They're often, I mean, I know it's different where you are, Janavamata, and I'm very happy to hear that, but they're often treated as a nuisance. They're disturbing the class, or they're a disruption, or they're not actually kind of welcomed and embraced. And you know, actually, here's a program for you. While your parents are in the class, there's a program for you. More often than not, the women end up sitting outside the class, trying to keep the children quiet, and all the men are in the class. That happens a lot. I see in a lot of temples I've gone to. And, you know, these are the things that need to change. This is about the inclusivity. You know, the women should be in the classes hearing about Krishna to feed their bhakti, so that when they raise their children, they can then inspire those children in bhakti. It's like a chain. And it can't be done if we're sitting outside.
It's very true. And I remember working for Stephen Covey. He used to have a little musing about leadership that I thought was so profound. And I think it captures what you're both talking about, part of Prabhupada's magic. He said, leadership is communicating people's worth so clearly they see it in themselves. What a really interesting way of doing that. And I do feel that one of the things that Prabhupada had this extraordinary talent to do is make everybody feel like their participation mattered and that they were a worthy person. And it's absolutely true. If as leaders we're not thinking that way, and there are people who feel like they are treasured, but others who feel like they're an afterthought or they're not even on the radar, that's a terrible situation, and that's certainly not a house in which the whole world can live. Let's get a couple more. There's a few other quotes coming in. So I think one of the comments here about, yes, some women don't even get to have children, even if they perhaps wish they could. What are your thoughts? Yeah, go ahead.
No, because I wanted to say it before when Abhidaya was talking that, you know, as brahmacharinis, you are also mothers, because you're mothers to everyone. Like if you actually are a brahmacharini, then, you know, that's why I love the term mataji. It's not a dirty word to me. It's an honor. It's an honor to be called a mataji, to be a mother. So we're actually the mother of every living entity, right? So whether you have your own children or whether you see, you know, all the living entities in the world as your children, you're relating to them in the mood of a loving mother. That's, you know, that's what Prabhupada said, right? Preach with the heart of a Bengali mother. What did he say? Like a lion.
Yeah, courage of an English colonel and the heart of a Bengali mother.
Anyway, you know, the heart of a Bengali mother. So even if we're not able to, like I didn't have children and I chose not to. I remember I was 28 years old. Carlos sat down and he said to me, you know, if we're going to have kids, we should do it now. And I just said to him, look, you know, as much as I would love to, I feel that there's just so many children in this world that need love. So, you know, I just want to give my love to the ones that are already here that don't have enough. You know, it takes a lot of energy to bring up a child. There's no guarantee that comes with it. It was my particular choice. And, you know, since I've had my astrology chart down, I can realize what fed into that. But the fact was that was my genuine desire, was to use the energy that I had to give love to those children in the world that don't have it. So whether you have your own children or whether you don't, also, Abhidaya, you know, the women can help each other when it comes to looking after the children. We call them, because they were my friends that had babies, right? And they're sitting outside on the stairs looking after their kids. You know, one of us can go out, you know, because we get to go to class most of the time and say, hey, look, I'll look after the kids for you. You go in. And, you know, this is the mood that Prabhupada wanted, the family mood, you know. And if we get in that mode of thinking like that, then it can all work so beautifully. But if it's just every man to himself and every woman to herself, and we're good to get in there and do our southerner and get the brownie points and, you know, work our way up the ladder of Krishna consciousness, but without everybody else, it's a lonely ride. So, you know, having that mood of a loving mother, you know, it applies to the males in our movement as well. It's not, you know, Prabhupada had the heart of a Bengali mother. And that's why everybody loved him so much. And that's why that, you know, the movement was so successful, you know, because he loved everyone so much that they would do anything for him. So we need to learn that from him, you know, and imbibe it, I feel, all of us, male and female body.
So let's see if we can get to what Sadhvi Sangha's talking about here, and we'll certainly ask her to build on this if she wants to. But just maybe paraphrasing, and hopefully I'm not taking it away from the intent of the question here. We obviously emphasize that role of raising children so strongly, like it's practically a dharmic mandate, that what if you don't, you know, actually have that opportunity through no fault of your own? Where does that leave you? Does that leave you cut adrift and so on? And how to best engage and feel like you're doing your dharma and so on. I don't want to. Sadhvi, please clarify if I completely misunderstood the thrust of the question. Abhidaya?
I think I mentioned earlier that, you know, not all women choose to have children, and that's fine. You know, I've got women in my family that have chosen not to have children. In fact, interestingly, one of the members that chose not to have children is a school teacher and has literally hundreds of children when she goes to work that she gives breakfast to every morning and looks after. So the nurturing side's still there. So yeah, some women either don't want to have children, or maybe there's a medical condition or something like that. And I just think that should be that individual woman's choice, and that there are so many services that need to be done that yes, I know it's not always a choice. Sometimes it's, you know, our biology has dictated, maybe we had a health problem or something like that. You know, and there's so many services that woman can do. You know, not just being a mother is not the only service of a woman. You know, there's many other things that we do as well. And I know many grihasta couples who are married, doing wonderful service, running outreach centres or preaching and teaching, running kirtans, who didn't have children. And I personally don't see the harm in that. I mean, it's my small, humble opinion, but I don't see the controversy in that personally. Like, if that's their choice, and if they can't, then I'm very sorry if that's the case and you wanted to. But like Janavan Mata was saying, we have so many children in our congregation. You know, I know one Mataji who loves children, but because of health reasons, she couldn't have a child. So she runs children's services. She does the Sunday school. She gets joy that way, and she gets that connection with children that way. And she is wonderful at it, by the way. You know, so that, you know, there are options. There are options there. I don't feel you should sort of look down on yourself because you weren't able to have a child. You know, be kind to yourself.
I liked what Janova said earlier about it. Ultimately, we're a personalist, you know, movement. And as a father of a daughter, actually, I've got a couple of daughters, but I certainly wouldn't want to say there's elements of the practice of Krishna consciousness that are just not available to you. Don't even aspire for these things. I just want her to feel fully enfranchised and the world's her oyster. And, you know, gratefully, she's actually adopted that kind of mindset. But it is, yeah, I don't like this idea that we've proscribed certain things that you just can't do. You know, your body is something you can't transcend, because that is, as Janova said, so antithetical to Prabhupada's mood. I might even just share a few of Prabhupada's other quotes here, because there was a few that I sourced, and get your thoughts on them. Oh, that's interesting. I thought I had one here on this page. This was one that I sourced earlier. In India, all the acharyas and their descendants later on acted only from the man's side. Their wives were at home because that is a system from old times, that women were not required to go out. But in Bhagavad Gita, we find that women are also equally competent, like the men, in the matter of the Krishna consciousness movement. Please, therefore, carry on these missionary activities and prove it by practical example that there is no bar for anyone in the matter of preaching work for Krishna consciousness. Yeah, because there's definitely going to be some of those traditionalists that we've spoken about who would say, what is it, you know, women preaching and going out distributing books? They should be in home raising babies and ironing their husbands' quarters and so on.
I take my kids out on book distribution.
Okay.
Yeah, I just take them with me. Yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to add that in. You know, it's not about, they're not a barrier, and being a woman and being a mother isn't a barrier. You can still be those things and do all those services and do those things as well. You can.
Here's a little one from a walk and a conversation in 1974. These women are not ordinary women. They are preachers. They are preachers. They are Vaishnav. By their association, one becomes a Vaishnav. So again, that distinction. There's the famous one, and maybe this is an ultimate type of participation. The Professors O'Connell, both are professors, were professors, if that makes sense, Mr. and Mrs. And I believe that this was the gentleman asking, is it possible, Swamiji, for a woman to be a guru in the line of disciplic succession? So, of course, this is a big controversy for us. And some people are arguing there's statements in various places that say otherwise. But this is the only time, I believe, Srila Prabhupada was asked this question point blank. Prabhupada, yes. Janava Devi was Nityananda's wife. She became. If she is able to go to the highest perfection of life, Why is it not possible to become guru? But not so many. Actually, one who's attained perfection, she can become guru, but man or woman, unless one has attained perfection. Yea, Krishna Tattvaveta say Guru Hoy. Now it's worth noting that this is the second half of Kiba Vipa Kiba Nasi Sudra Keni Noi. So this idea, whether you're a Brahmin, whether you're a sannyasi, whether you're a Sudra. So irrespective of where you are in the social strata, Yea, Krishna Tattvaveta, if you know the science of Krishna, say Guru Hoy, you're a guru. The qualification of guru is that he must be fully cognizant of the science of Krishna. Then he or she can become guru. Yea, Krishna Tattvaveta say Guru Hoy. In our material world, is it any prohibition that woman cannot become professor? If she is qualified, she can become professor. What is the wrong there? She must be qualified. That is the position. So, similarly, if a woman understands Krishna consciousness perfectly, she can become guru. Now, we have had not just some controversy about this in our society, but recently, I think the first female Diksha initiations happened. I'd like your views around this. Are there things that should be uniquely the domain of men? Or is it that, yes, there's a high likelihood that some Vaishnavis will feel more inspired and encouraged and engaged by being able to seek shelter and guidance from a Vaishnavi? So that question to Janava first.
I think Prabhupada already answered it.
It's pretty straightforward.
It's kind of obvious, isn't it? I mean, like he's saying, if you know the science of Krishna and you have, you know, the qualities of a guru, you know, like in the nectar of instruction, they're listed, right? Someone who's controlled the tongue, the belly, the genitals, and the senses is qualified, you know. So if you've got the qualifications, then you can do the job. If it's your desire, and obviously if there's people that are approaching you wanting that reciprocation, I mean, it's a no-brainer, to be honest. I can't understand why it's a controversy. I really, really, really can't. Like, the question is, are these devotees qualified to do that service? If the answer is yes, then they do the service. I don't understand why. Honestly don't. I don't understand why it's a controversy. Sorry, that's all I've got to say. Like, I can't understand why it's a problem. And even our Gaudiya Vaishnava history shows us there was Janavamata, there was Hemalata Thakurani, there was Gangamata Goswamini. There's many in our line. So, yeah, I mean, I can't understand.
I think it will come as no surprise that I'm completely in support of female Diksha gurus. My husband is a disciple of Her Grace Narayani Mataji. I mean, like you said, if they're qualified, and, you know, I can't think of someone who's, you know, she's so qualified, you know, like, yeah, I don't see the issue. And also, like, you know, here's a question. Did having men, and only men, in power, making all the choices and giving Diksha, has that worked for us so far? Like, let's ask ourselves that question. Has it worked? And I think the answer is no. I'm sorry, it hasn't worked. And so some changes need to be made. You know, we have seen, you know, and this isn't to say that all the male leadership is like this. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm talking about having exclusively male leadership and giving Diksha. That hasn't always worked. And we have seen gurus having fall downs. We've seen abuses of power. We've even seen cover-ups of child abuse. So maybe having some women in leadership and giving Diksha might redress some of that balance. And, you know, disciples, it's a personal relationship. You as a disciple approach your guru. And so if you have approached a guru who's in a female body and that's who you want as your spiritual master and they are qualified, what's the harm?
Very mindful that we're almost at the hour and a half, and it's pretty late for you, Janava, so we won't let you miss Mangalati or anything.
I'm just warming up.
You're just getting started. Okay. Now, Sadhvi Sangha is clarifying, you know, just the point that she was making earlier. So it's to do with the acknowledgement, a place of significance. Do you have a view here or a response to Sadhvi Sangha's point?
Are you asking me, Damodar?
Either of you. If you want to start us off, Abhidaya.
Sure. I mean, I would say that there's definitely an emphasis on women being mothers and that being valuable. And maybe I could understand how a woman who hasn't had a child might feel invisible, because there's such an emphasis on it's the dharma of a woman to have children. And like, as we know, there's some women that can't, or, you know, I'm making these points looking through the eyes of a new person stepping into a KC society. Exactly. And they would, you know, but even just, okay, not women and mothers and being mothers aside and having children, you know, women's experience when they come into ISKCON is so varied. And one of the observations that I've made watching, you know, people come through is that when you're a young, attractive girl, sorry to say, you are welcomed much, much more than if you are, say, like me, you know, a middle-aged woman who's had a few kids and, you know, my beauty is a thing of the past. You're not valued in the same way. I'm just being really blunt here. Sorry if this is a little bit controversial. But, you know, the girls that come through that are young and, you know, youthful, they get given the harmonium lessons. They get given the cartel lessons. They're at the front of the Haranam. And the women who come through, and I have seen this, women that come through who are middle-aged, they come in as devotees, they feel invisible. They have communicated that with me. And they are convinced it's because they are a bit older and they're not perceived as being as beautiful or something like that. That's what they're expressing to me. And so, yes, there are these barriers for women, maybe women who don't have children, who are a bit older and they're new to the movement. Women in those situations have expressed to me that they have felt like the reception isn't as warm. And I noticed that through my own experience. You know, I can remember going around begging like for harmonium lessons and being told no, I wasn't seen as worthwhile being taught. And then I saw some other people coming through who were young, you know, from the yoga community. So they've got, you know, yoga bodies and they're young Western girls and they're having all this stuff thrown at them, frankly. And I found that disheartening. You know, I found that kind of like, hang on a minute, but we're all valuable here. We all have something to offer. And actually, people who are a bit older have some life experience to bring. And that's not being valued because actually, again, we're tapping into bodily consciousness and subjectifying those women and thinking, oh, well, you know, when they're out on Haranam, they're going to attract people. They're going to attract people to our movement because they're young and attractive. I just think that's the wrong way. That's just the wrong way to go. I really do. So I understand the question that there's this almost sense of feeling invisible because you don't tick those boxes of what being a woman should be in the common view. So I sympathise. I don't know what the solution is though, but I sympathise.
Okay, it's just a clarification. It's Kamaniya rather than Sadhvi Sangha that's asking those questions.
I thought so.
You recognized.
I knew. Oh, yeah, I knew who it was. Yeah, I hope I tried. You know, it's hard for me to speak from the experience of a woman who hasn't had children because I've had them. So it's hard for me. I don't want to project anything onto a woman whose lived experience is different, but I can see how a woman who hasn't had children and isn't fulfilling that role as okay, I'm a mother, might feel a bit invisible in the temple or feel somehow a little bit ostracized. But I would like to say that she is a wonderful mentor and to many of us, including myself. So, you know, biological children aside, there's many people who respect Kamanya.
Going back to the point that Janava was making, if we're personalists, yes, we appreciate Varnashram and everyone has their Swadharma and so on, but it's not like that's just some brutal regime to impose upon people. It is a framework around how we'll be best situated and happiest situated. But beyond that, we're all still people. And therefore, dealing with each individual and their individual needs and their individual personalities and their individual desires to contribute and their individual talents is better than simply saying, no, you belong to this classification this category, and this is the box that you go in, and don't you dare exhibit even anything outside of that. That just seems to be a very unloving kind of way of thinking of things. I'm thinking about moving towards wrap. There's another comment here from Mahajan.
Can I just say one
yeah,
thing?
Go ahead. Sure.
Yeah,
sure.
just a response to that question. Like, how I feel is that, you know, we, especially the women in our movement, have this real, it's like a challenge that we're throwing out there to say, come on, let's step up to the plate. And for every person that walks through that door, see them as, you know, a Mahatma. That's what Krishna says, you know, out of many thousands among men, one may endeavor for perfection. Out of those, so anyone that comes to the temple, anyone that's stepping towards Krishna consciousness, they're so dear to Krishna. They're so, we need to treat every single person that walks through the door like that. So especially a woman's nature is nurturing, it's loving, it's motherly, it's all of those things. So, you know, I see any person that comes in like a seed, right? A seed, and you water that seed, and then you find out what's inside the seed, and as it starts to bloom, then you know what feed it and how. You know, imagine if every one of us, not just the woman, but I'm saying this is particularly a challenge, I think, for the woman to step up and show how it's done, right? To actually have that attitude to every single person that comes to the temple and care about them as if they were your own child or your own mother or your own sister or your own brother, to love them in that way and then see what happens, right? No one will ever feel left out. No one will ever feel invisible. No one will ever feel unwanted or undervalued because they will be loved by someone, you know, and that's, you know, when Gopa Vrindapal said to Prabhupada, you know, how can we become expert preachers? Prabhupada said, expert preacher means that someone will come and live with you for 3 days, and after those 3 days, they'll want to become a devotee. So what's he talking about? He's talking about, you know, loving someone in such a way and sharing Krishna consciousness with them in such a personal way that they don't want to go anywhere. You know, they don't want to leave because they feel so loved. So that's the responsibility of every single devotee, you know, in the Krishna consciousness movement. If we saw it like that, wow, what a revolution would take place. Because that's what everyone's looking for in this world, to love and to be loved. And that's what we have to offer. And we just need to learn how to do it, you know. So, yeah, I think it's really important that we understand that, because sometimes we get very caught up in the details and the protocols and all the other stuff, but we actually forget the simple process of Krishna consciousness that Prabhupada gave us, you know, and Jesus summed it up as well, you know, love one another as I have loved you. Well, that's what Prabhupada told us. So sorry, but I had to get that out, because I just think it's really important, you know, that we understand this. You know, it's so easy to lose your soul in the process of trying to be perfect and be the best and to be the, you know, all of those things, you know, and you just forget about what the essence of Krishna consciousness is actually about. We want to make sure that doesn't happen. And I feel that's why it's so important to honor the women, because that's what Vishaka explains in that thing. She said, Prabhupada says 2 types of intelligence, right? Buddhi and Meda. So Buddhi is, you know, logic and reasoning, and then the Meda, which is the type of intelligence that Krishna talks about in the qualities of a woman, is a wisdom and a nurturing, right? So, you know, women naturally have that. Prabhupada explains it, doesn't. That's why there's more women in religious movements, because they're simple-hearted and loving by nature. And so, you know, we need to really fan that flame. We need to honor that, because I feel that's the secret of success, to be honest. And that's not speaking from a bodily concept of life. That's speaking from, you know, an objective perspective, that you want to utilize what Krishna has given you for the best objective, you know, to share Krishna consciousness by encouraging those that have that propensity to utilize it, you know, and that's what any good manager would do.
That's what I love about the focus on love, because if it comes from a loving place, and all of the different codes are also nurturing, if they're constraints to control and shame and so on. That's why I often call them the Vedic Taliban, because it's almost like some people impose it like Sharia. Cover your head in the most unloving way. It's not that we're thinking, this is my daughter, I should protect her. It's, this is my daughter, she's brought shame by not covering her head. Morality police, acid in the face, whatever it is. It's like, wow, it's the opposite of love. It's the exact opposite. It's something very, very unusual. And we know that a fanatical adherence to the rules and an imposition of rules is one of the things that's unfavorable for Bhakti Niyamagraha.
So unattractive.
Yeah, well, and super scary, because it definitely doesn't come from a place of how do we create an inclusive society where all souls feel valued. It's how do we keep people in their place, and how do I assert myself as the upholder of the pure ways, or something like that. Kamaniya has another point, and then we'll deal with Mahajans. So I always raise the same question every discussion on the topic. Sorry. I don't feel personally invisible, grateful to have several different fulfilling services, not talking about myself. So it's just a general point of conversation there. And there's a throwback here from Mahajan to the Guru conversation. Guru is a question of qualification, and we're seeing that there are many resounding failures at the moment of men taking that role. The subject of the Guru is very controversial in these times and goes far beyond gender. I definitely feel there's a sort of territorial element to some of this. This is our space, and, you know, we don't want to make room and accommodate others. I definitely feel some of those things going on. Given that it's now 7:36 AETD or DT or whatever the right thing is, I might get some summing up kind of comments. I'm suspecting this is going to be one of many. And look, a massive thank you to both of you for speaking so well and actually giving quite a rich exposition on this kind of topic. What would you like to leave viewers or listeners thinking of? And maybe this even tease up future sessions. That question to you first, Abhidaya.
So I actually kind of, as my summary, want to kind of pick up where Janavamata left off. And what she was talking about was like, if we cultivate the mood in our temple, how we welcome people, how people feel included, there'll be no question of having to kind of recruit people, bring them in, because they'll just want to come. They'll hear from their friends, they'll just want to come, and then they'll want to stay, and they're going to want to keep coming back. So I just kind of want to put it out there that when you're in the temple and you see someone for the first time that you know it might be their first trip, or you've never seen them before, smile at them, reach out to them, whether they're a man or a woman, right? Whether they have children or not, right? Just reach out to them, smile at them, give them the sheet with the mantras on of the prayer that we're singing, you know, show them where the prasadam is, show them where we wash the plates, you know, make them feel welcome. It's actually so easy to do and free, and it makes such a big difference. You know, when I first went to the temple, no one spoke to me. I kind of wanted to be preached to. I was like, convert me. And no one did. I converted myself through reading Prabhupada's books. But I was not converted by the temple. And that's something that we need to change. We need to really look at how we welcome people. And instead of seeing, oh, well, that's a male or a female, or they've got kids or they haven't got kids, or they can do this service or that service, just welcome them. Just make them feel included. And that's going to make a huge difference to our society. And that comes from all of us. We can all do that with people that we see for the first time. And yes, I know sometimes there's some challenges, right? There's some challenges about, you know, we might feel like, you know, why can't there be female Diksha gurus? Or there's books written about the roles of women that are so misogynistic that they're banned in ISKCON. You know, I know those things are there, but we can be part of the change, and we can direct the focus as the community. And we can show people that actually, you know, women aren't here to take over. We don't want to take over. We want to work hand in hand. You know, we want to work hand in hand, and we want to see where we can be of service to Prabhupada's mission. And that's my sincere prayer. Thank you.
Thanks, Abhidaya. Here's a little point from Mahajan. Love and personalism. So that's definitely been a big theme. All right, Jennifer, final thoughts.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Abhidaya. But thank you. You said it so beautifully. To me, honestly, it's all about love. Like, you know, if you know love, then you can give love. If you want to be a Vaishnava or a Vaishnavi, you know, make that your life mission, because the qualities that come with that are all attractive. So let's focus on becoming, you know, the servant of the servant. Let's focus on becoming more humble than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree. Those qualities of a Vaishnava, if you have them, you'll know exactly how to act. You'll know exactly what to do. And you'll be such an ocean of love and mercy that people won't be able to resist, you know, and that's what Prabhupada taught us. So for me, you know, be the change that you want to see. The challenge is to the individual. That's what I feel, that you become self-effulgent, right? That's what Prabhupada talks about, the self-effulgent acharyas, because they're actually going deeply into the process of Krishna consciousness. They're chanting the holy name to purify the heart of all the dust accumulated for lifetimes. They're developing the qualities of a Vaishnava, but then they're so enthusiastic to share them with others. It's got nothing to do with what body you're driving. It's got everything to do with what's going inside your heart. So, you know, that's the challenge as far as I'm concerned. The externals really don't matter if what's going on internally is real, because that's what you'll share no matter where you are and no matter what's going on around you. So if you focus on that, then I feel like everything else is going to take care of itself, because people do notice. You know, if you're getting it right, isn't it? If you're coming from a place of authenticity and humility and true love, that's going to shine a light. That's going to shine a big light, and nothing can put that light out, because Krishna says, you know, where there is light, there is no darkness, right? Mm-hmm. So we just have to hold on to that and shine the light. And, you know, finally, I'd like to wrap up by saying that who's the head of our movement ultimately? Who is it?
Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Oh, Srimati Radharani.
Well, yeah. Yeah, that's the manifestation for this age. But really, when you think about it, like Prabhupada says, it's Radharani, right? And so we can learn everything from her. She is the ocean of compassion. She is so full of love, and she loves us all so much. She comes, you know, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to give us the holy name. So we take our cue from her, and she doesn't let the boys walk all over her. You know, they put up a good fight. If they get out of line, they stand up for themselves, but always coming from a place of a deep love, you know, a desire to please the Lord. So I take my cue from her and from Gauranga Mahaprabhu and from Srila Prabhupada and from all of you. And we can do it. Like, let's just believe that we can do it, right? Let's just believe that we can all make a difference, and we will. Srila Prabhupada.
Jai.
A massive thanks to both of you. I think it's, we've got a thank you message here from Mahajan as well. I think you've given such a good account for anyone who might have still needed convincing. You've given such a good account of intelligent contributions from Vaishnavis. Let's hope that this also encourages other Vaishnavis to join in. We're not expecting that this will overnight dissolve the, you know, the hardened attitudes that are sometimes out there, but hopefully we are chipping away and creating that culture which is that much more loving and welcoming and inclusive and all of those things in pursuance of Prabhupada's mission. Please stay on, both of you. If you are watching, thank you so much for doing so. Please share. Let's try and get other people involved in the conversation. And please enroll in Virtual Ishtaghosthi for future sessions. If you'd like to be in one of these conversations, you'd certainly be welcome. Please just DM me. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Damodar Prabhu.
Hare Bolo. Thank you both.
Thank you so much.